Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever noticed how sometimes, even when the facts seem clear, our brains just really want to stick to what we already believe?
Oh, absolutely. It's like we're wired to, well, confirm our own worldview sometimes, isn't
Hmm.
it? Maybe not always aiming for pure objective truth.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how this shows up in some, really predictable ways, patterns of thinking.
Right. These mental habits that can subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, kind of twist how we see things, ourselves, other people.
The whole world, really. And it's not about being flawed or anything. It's more about understanding how the subconscious works, right? Trying to find proof for what it thinks is already true.
Precisely. And that's what this deep dive is really about today. We want to shine a light on some of the most common types of this, let's call it distorted thinking.
We're drawing heavily from an article that itself builds on some foundational work by Doctors Matthew McKay, Martha Davis, and Patrick Fanning. They outlined a lot of this way back in 1981.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. So our mission really is to explore 15 of these key types.
Think of it as building up your awareness, a mental toolkit, maybe.
Mhm.
The better you can spot these patterns,
Both in your own head and, when you're interacting with others.
the better you can navigate them.
Right. So let's not look at this like a checklist of problems. It's more an exploration. These are common mental landscapes we all find ourselves in from time to time.
Yeah, understanding them isn't about judgment. It's about seeing how our thoughts really do shape our reality. So let's jump in.
Let's do it. So at the core, thinking, well, often means thinking objectively, right? Sticking to the facts.
But like you said, that inner autopilot is always scanning for things that match its programming.
hmm And these distorted patterns, they're super common. Once you learn the names, you start seeing them, well, kind of everywhere.
Okay, so let's start with number one on the list, filtering. What does that look like?
Filtering.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Imagine you're wearing glasses that only let the negative stuff through.
Ah.
You focus intensely on one, maybe unpleasant detail,
Hmm.
and it's like the rest of the experience just gets deleted.
Right, like you get a work review, maybe 9 great comments, and one little suggestion for improvement.
And that one suggestion is all you can think about for days.
Yeah. The source material says it isolates the experience, right?
Yeah.
Blows the bad part way out of proportion.
Exactly. You're scaring so hard at the tiny negative thing, you completely miss all the good stuff around it. It just colors everything.
Okay, so that's filtering. Next up is polarization. What's the core idea here?
Polarization is very black and white.
And
All or nothing.
no gray areas.
None. It's either good or bad, right or wrong. No middle ground is allowed in this way of thinking.
And the article really emphasizes how this hits self-perception hard, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. You're either a perfect success or you're an absolute failure.
Mm.
There's no in between, no room for like learning from mistakes or just being okay.
Wow, yeah, that binary thinking, it just leaves no space for complexity or nuance.
Especially about yourself. Okay, so from black and white, let's talk about overgeneralization.
Overgeneralization. This sounds like using a really broad brush.
That's a good way to put it. It's taking one single event, maybe one piece of evidence,
Mm.
and drawing this huge sweeping conclusion about, well, everything based on it.
The always and never trap.
Exactly.
This always happens to me, or I'll never get this right just because something went wrong once.
Precisely. And the real danger here, as the source points out, is how much this can limit your life.
How so?
Well, you start avoiding things, future opportunities, new experiences,
Mm.
because you've made this blanket rule based on just one past incident.
That makes sense. Why bother trying if you've already decided I always mess this up? Okay, what about mind reading?
Mind reading. This is where you just assume you know exactly what someone else is thinking or feeling.
And why they're acting the way they do.
Yes. And, crucially, often assuming it's about you.
Right, and the article we looked at connects this to projection, yeah. We're basically guessing their motives based on how we would feel.
That's a really key point. You're interpreting their actions through the filter of your own emotions and reactions, not necessarily what's actually going on for them.
So you're kind of missing their reality entirely.
Pretty much. You see them through your own internal lens.
Okay, so from guessing other people's thoughts to predicting the future. What about catastrophizing?
Catastrophizing. This is jumping straight to the absolute worst case scenario, automatically,
Taking something small or maybe even neutral.
and spinning it in your head until it becomes this inevitable disaster. Like, if your boss emails you, "Can we talk?"
Yeah.
You immediately think you're getting fired.
Instead of, 100 other possibilities.
Exactly. The source suggests this often comes from a lack of trust in yourself. Like
Yeah.
you don't believe you can handle challenges or adapt.
So expecting the worst feels safer somehow.
In a twisted way, yeah.
Mhm.
It feels like you won't be caught off guard. But the reality is, it just ramps up anxiety like crazy.
Yeah, constantly living in that disaster movie trailer in your head. Heavy stuff. Okay, number 6, personalization. This feels like a big one.
It is very common. Personalization is when you interpret everything that happens, especially negative stuff, as being directly about you.
Or because of you.
Yes, you believe people's actions, their moods, their words are all some kind of reaction to you.
The source material puts it as like an inability to see a world that exists outside of your direct involvement.
hmm If someone seems quiet or unhappy, your first thought is, what did I do?
Right. Or if a team project has a setback, you feel personally responsible, even if lots of factors were involved.
Yes. And they mention a key symptom, constantly comparing yourself to others. Using comparison is the main way to figure out your own worth.
Wow, that sounds exhausting, carrying all that perceived weight. Okay, number 7 is control fallacies.
Control fallacies. These kind of come in two opposing flavors.
Okay.
First, there's feeling externally controlled, like you're totally helpless, just a victim of fate. Things happen to you, and you have no power.
And the second flavor.
Is the complete opposite, but just as distorted. Feeling internally controlled. This is where you believe you are somehow personally responsible for the happiness or the pain of everyone around you.
Ah, so either totally powerless or responsible for everything.
Exactly. And the source points out that both often mean you're not actually taking healthy, appropriate control over your own life and choices. You're either giving up all responsibility or taking on way too much.
Two sides of a warped coin. Got it. Number 8, fallacy of fairness.
This one can be tricky. It's the rigid belief that you know precisely what's fair, what's right, what's just in any situation.
And anyone who disagrees.
Is just wrong or doesn't get it. There's this inability to accept that, well, different people might have different, equally valid ideas about fairness, or that different truths can coexist.
Because your sense of fairness feels so obviously correct based on your experience.
Right. You assume it must be a universal standard. And conflict only happens because other people aren't seeing things your way the right way. It keeps you stuck.
Very rigid. Okay, following on from fairness, what about just straightforward blaming?
Blaming in this context is essentially about shifting responsibility. It's making other people or external factors the cause of your own pain or problems.
It's their fault I feel this way.
Exactly. But the source also highlights the flip side, which is equally distorted.
Blaming yourself for everything.
Yes, constantly taking the blame for problems, even things that are clearly way outside your control. It's a skewed approach to accountability, whether you're pointing the finger outwards or inwards. It avoids really dealing with the situation constructively.
Okay. Number 10, shoulds. I feel like we all have some of these kicking around.
Oh, definitely. Shoulds are those strict, often unexamined rules we carry about how people, including ourselves, should or shouldn't behave.
And these rules often come from where? Family, culture.
Absolutely. Upbringing, society, all those influences.
Mm.
And the source notes the strong emotions, often anger or resentment, that bubble up when other people break our rules.
And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves not to break them either.
Huge pressure. Because we believe these shoulds are absolute truths, we end up judging others harshly when they don't conform, and judging ourselves too.
Sounds like living under a very strict invisible rule book. Number 11, emotional reasoning.
Emotional reasoning. This is basically believing that whatever you feel must automatically be true. Your emotion becomes the evidence.
Without stepping back to evaluate it.
Exactly. No critical thought applied. So, like you said earlier, if you feel stupid, then you conclude you are stupid. If you feel unlovable, you take it as fact.
Feeling bored means I am boring. Feeling like a failure means I am a failure.
Precisely. The source highlights the internal conflict this creates. Your feelings are dictating reality, bypassing your rational thinking altogether. Your emotions become undeniable proof.
Yeah, I can see how that would cause problems.
Yeah.
Okay, number 12, fallacy of change.
This one is really focused on relationships, often. It's the expectation, sometimes spoken, often not, that other people must change in order for you to be happy.
Placing the responsibility for your happiness squarely on someone else.
Right. The source points out how damaging this is. You're essentially saying, my well-being depends entirely on you acting differently.
Instead
of recognizing that your happiness primarily depends on the choices you make, the actions you take. That's the core distortion here. Believing external changes by others are the key to your internal state.
That's a really important distinction. Okay, from changing others, let's look at global labeling.
Global labeling. This is when you take one or two qualities you see in someone, or maybe a small group,
Then you generalize.
massively. You create these broad, often negative, stereotypical labels for much larger groups, sometimes even, all of humanity based on limited experience.
Reducing complex people or situations down to a single, simple tag, often negative.
Exactly. And the source points out two big dangers. One, if you apply these global labels to yourself, I'm just a loser, I'm incompetent, it absolutely crushes your self-esteem.
And employing them to others.
Fuels prejudice, damages relationships. You stop seeing individuals, you only see the label. You lose all nuance, all possibility for positive traits or variation.
Okay. Number 14 sounds related to some of the others. Being right.
Yes, there's definitely overlap. Being right is this intense, constant feeling that you're on trial, that you have to prove your opinions, your actions, your choices are correct, the most correct.
And being wrong feels dangerous.
Extremely. The source suggests that in this thinking pattern, being wrong gets equated with being fundamentally bad or unworthy or inadequate.
So that need to always be right makes you.
Super defensive, really closed-minded. You can't genuinely consider other perspectives or learn anything new because you're so busy defending your current position. Admitting you might be wrong feels like a threat to your core self.
That sounds incredibly stressful. Okay, finally, number 15. Heaven's reward fallacy.
Heaven's reward fallacy. This is the belief that there's some kind of cosmic accountant keeping score, tallying up all your good deeds, your sacrifices, your self-denial.
And expecting a payoff.
Yes. Expecting that all this effort and sacrifice will somehow, eventually, lead to a reward. Often an unrelated, almost magical reward. Like because you worked so hard and sacrificed so much, the universe owes you happiness or success.
So you keep doing the right thing, pushing yourself, even when it feels draining or doesn't make sense.
Exactly. You engage in self-denial or overexertion, anticipating this payoff that, well, it often doesn't come, at least not in the way you expect.
And the source says this leads to burnout.
Yes, physical and emotional exhaustion, because the reward isn't inherently linked to the sacrifice, or it just doesn't exist in that expected form.
Right.
You keep waiting for a prize that never arrives.
Wow. Okay, 15 patterns. That's quite a list. As we went through them, I imagine you listening might have felt a little jolt of recognition here and there.
Oh, for sure. Either in your own thinking habits or maybe recognizing patterns in people you know or interact with.
So why is it so important to actually spend time naming these? Why identify these specific distortions?
Because fundamentally, they aren't just abstract ideas. These ways of thinking, they actively shape your inner world.
They influence your choices, your relationships.
Absolutely. And critically, how you see yourself, your sense of worth. They can put real, tangible limits on your life, often without you even realizing that's what's happening.
It's like trying to navigate with a compass that's just slightly off, isn't it? You think you're heading straight, but you're slowly, subtly drifting off course.
That's a great analogy. And understanding these distortions, actually being able to name them, filtering, catastrophizing, shoulds, whatever it is, that's the crucial first step.
The first step towards what?
Towards gaining perspective, towards being able to pause and question those automatic thoughts and assumptions that aren't really serving you or aren't aligned with, objective reality.
So reflecting on all this, drawing from the insights of McKay, Davis, and Fanning, what's the takeaway for you, the listener?
I think it's that recognizing these common ways our thinking can deviate from objective reality isn't about blaming yourself or others. It's really about building self-awareness.
Giving yourself the power to step back.
Exactly. To question those instant reactions, those ingrained assumptions that often spring directly from these patterns.
Okay, so here's maybe a final thought to carry with you from this deep dive, something from the core of the source material.
The fundamental idea is that thinking well really hinges on thinking objectively, grounding ourselves in facts as much as possible.
And these subtle distortions we've talked about, if we let them run unchecked, they can quietly narrow our world.
Yeah, they can strain relationships, limit opportunities, and chip away at our self-worth by building a personal reality that's based more on these old biases than on what's actually true.
So maybe, as you go about your day, just try to gently observe your own thoughts, without judgment.
Just notice, can you catch a moment of filtering? Or maybe catastrophizing? Or perhaps hear a rigid should pop up?
Just notice the patterns.
Awareness really is the beginning of everything.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive